Hey guys, welcome to the iPhone 7 review. This device is measuring in 138.3 by 67.1 by 7.1 millimeters and is weighing in a really light 138 grams. Basically put in simple terms, that this device is pretty compact considering its screen size and is really light for its size. Notice that the sides have these kind of curved edges, which is actually very nice to hold in the hand. Despite it being really thin, there's no concern that it might slip out of my hand by accident. For its appearance, it's pretty easy on the eyes. Unfortunately, there's nothing really changed between this and the iPhone 6s or the iPhone 6. Going over the sides and ports, we'll start over the bottom and see all those holes at the bottom. Well, one side is housing a microphone and the other side is housing a speaker, and in the center we have the lightning bolt connector. Now going over to the left side, we have the volume control buttons, and just above that we have a silent switch and volume switch. So basically switching between complete silent mode or ringer mode, but there's no vibration mode. So kind of disappointing that it doesn't have that, kind of bizarre also. Over on the top is absolutely nothing, and over on the right we have the power button near the top, and just at the center of the phone we have the SIM card tray. And you'll notice that there's no headphone jack, no 3.5mm auxiliary wire anywhere on the device. Fortunately, out of the box, Apple does include a lightning bolt to auxiliary wire connector, so you can still connect your regular headphones. Now, I do understand a lot of people are going to wireless headphones, but for decent ones, they're starting at a minimum $100. What about all those millions of vehicles on the road, just like me, where you only have an auxiliary wire connection, so you have to use the adapter? But what if you want to stream music from your iPhone to your car, but also recharge the phone in case it's dying at the same time? You can't do that. So if you don't have a lightning bolt connector in your car, if it doesn't support Bluetooth technology, you can't listen to music and you can't charge the phone at the same time. This actually seems to be a major step backwards in terms of technology compatibility from Apple. Still on the topic of the body design, this device is IP67 certified, which means it's dust and water resistant. Although one thing to keep in note is that if you're trying to unlock the device underwater, say in a pool or something, with your fingerprint reader, it won't recognize it. It seems like the water kind of interferes with the sensor. And on the back we have a 12 megapixel camera, and if the color sample that you're taking a picture of is really saturated and rich in color, it'll look okay, but at other times it'll look kind of dull, even if your subject has some decent colors in it. You know, switching over from daylight to low light performance, I have to say that the iPhone in low light performance is outstanding. There's no flash used in any of these, but there's some pretty poor lighting done on purpose. It performs quite well for a smartphone. Now in terms of video, what you guys are seeing is 4K video footage compressed down to 1080p. And again, we're not getting the richest colors here, but the clarity is outstanding. It looks great. Although the major problem here is the audio issue. But I will talk about that in just a bit. What I want to demonstrate here is I'm actually shaking the camera because it has optical image stabilization. And even when I zoom in, I'm trying to shake the camera just a little bit, it performs amazing. The stabilization in video is fantastic and one of the best I've ever seen in a smartphone. So this time all audio and video is being captured with the front-facing 7 megapixel camera. That's right, you heard me correctly. And it does record at 1080p. Now I can say easily, with confidence, that this is the best front-facing camera. The clarity and detail in it is just outstanding. You know, Apple has done a great job, so for video chat, this is superb. Now here's the problem, is that it doesn't matter if you're recording with the front-facing camera or rear camera, the audio that's being recorded in the video is terrible. It suffers from the exact same problem as the iPhone 6s from last year, is that the audio being captured is recorded in a single channel, whereas other smartphones, usually Android devices, record in dual channels. So when you play the video back, you'll have stereo playback. It'll sound a lot clearer, sharper, and it'll play back better on your television or computer or whatever it may be. The problem here is that not only is it recording in a single channel, so the audio is not that great in terms of playback, in terms of clarity, but the audio being captured isn't that great anyway. That's quite unfortunate considering that the cameras perform pretty good. The camera app is really poor and lacking and hasn't really changed much over the last few years. But if you want to make any change to the camera settings or the recording method, you have to go to the main phone system settings menu to do that. You can't do it straight from the camera app, which actually wastes a bit of time, which doesn't really seem to make any sense. So that home button is technically no longer a button, it's a capacitive touch interface. It actually doesn't really press in when you press it. The phone actually vibrates to mimic that it's a button though. So the reason they have this, it kind of makes sense. You still need a fingerprint sensor, right? If you want to unlock it with your fingerprint. Now I do notice that when pressing it, it kind of vibrates the back all around. At first I didn't like this, but actually getting used to it, I actually prefer this method over having an actual button. And you can adjust the vibration feedback. You have 3 different option settings. So the display is actually a 4.7 inch LED backlit IPS display with a resolution of 750 by 1334. Basically making it 720p. And a lot of people argue that you don't need 1080p because you can't really tell the difference on a screen this size. That's actually incorrect. I've seen it on Android devices, and yes, I've put them side by side and you can tell a minor difference. Now having 720p, there's nothing wrong with it. The screen is pretty sharp, it looks great, but it's kind of like lagging behind a few years against the competition, say Android devices, where they're all on 1080p, even for screens of this size, and yeah, you can tell a bit of difference. The color pop isn't the greatest, but they're pretty lifelike, which is actually a good thing. They're not overexposed and oversaturated. The viewing angles are not that great. In terms of the screen brightness, it's just okay. So at this point I'm going to do my speaker test, and the first speaker, as I mentioned, is at the bottom of the device, and the second speaker is actually located in the earpiece, so it's actually front facing. Now the camera is about 2 feet away from the smartphone. The smartphone is on max volume, and I'm just playing a video from my YouTube channel. It's a review of my smart garage door opener. I'll put a link to that review in the video description, so let's take a listen. The mic chamberlain in place is a mounting bracket, and only 2 screws are required to hold this mounting bracket, which are actually included in the box. Now, if you don't... So the volume output is actually pretty good, although at max volume it does kind of get muffled and a little distorted. So finally, after lagging years behind the competition, the 16 gig version of the iPhone is gone. Now it starts at minimum 32 gigs. You'll also have an option to buy in 64 or 128 gigs. Unfortunately, there's still no micro SD card slot for expandable storage. Straight out of the box, you're getting iOS 10. This is the 10th iteration of iOS, and it looks almost the same as every other iOS version ever, actually since almost the beginning. I would have expected something huge with the 10th version of iOS. Unfortunately, no. You can click and drag icons, move them around. You can't really customize anything at all except for the wallpaper background, which is covered up, and it just looks boring. And still, for some bizarre reason, you cannot organize your apps in alphabetical order. Furthermore, there's no back button, and to go back on a lot of apps, it's always in the top left of the screen, which is hard to reach. Whereas the competition is pretty much Android devices, and I can pick up any Android device and show you that they have live wallpapers, they have moving animations at the background, you can animate the way your screen slides. I mean, this has been kind of going on for years with Android, but nothing has really changed with iOS. It's extremely dull and extremely boring. Almost nothing has changed. As usual with iPhones, Apple kept things pretty much a dark secret in terms of what the processor is really like and the GPU. All we know is that the processor is an A10 Fusion processor, and it has 2 gigs of RAM inside the iPhone, and I'm not even sure what the GPU is. But that doesn't really matter, right? The numbers don't really matter. It's how it performs in day-to-day tasks. Now iOS is extremely simplified, too simplified, so of course it's going to perform wicked fast. But carrying over to top iOS graphic games, it performs splendid. There's zero lag, the frame rate is astonishing and great. Although I have to note, one thing is that when playing video games for a long period of time, it gets warm but not hot, which is a good thing because the iPhone 6s from last year will get too hot. So they have improved that with the iPhone 7. The battery inside is a 1960 milliamp battery, which isn't that big, and it performs just over a little over a day with general and moderate usage of watching YouTube videos, Spotify music, browsing the web, and whatever. The major problem here is that it would have made up if it had fast recharging. Unfortunately, charging the device from 15% to 100% takes about 2 hours. Yeah, you heard me. In terms of connectivity, we have GPS, Wi-Fi, which supports 802.11ac, LTE, Bluetooth, and an almost useless NFC chip because it can only be used with Apple Pay, and no Mirrorcast, which is the universally accepted method to mirroring your device's display to, well, almost every Blu-ray player, almost every smart TV nowadays, almost every media player released nowadays, so yeah. One thing to note here is that call quality is fantastic, one of the best on a smartphone I've ever heard. Unfortunately, the cell phone signal is really poor. In fact, where I can get like fast LTE, browsing web pages on Android devices, the iPhone 7 can barely send a text. In fact, I get a lot of bounce back texts where there's weak signals, whereas Android devices in the same spot would perform amazing. It's hard to consider the iPhone 7 an upgrade over the iPhone 6s. I mean, they did make it dust and water resistant. They actually have 2 speakers on the device now, one of them is front facing, which is great, but it's also a step backwards. Why did they get rid of that 3.5mm headphone jack, which can also be used to connect to your car stereo system through an auxiliary wire? Furthermore, they haven't really improved upon things like, say, the terrible audio that's being recorded when recording a video with a front-facing or rear-facing camera. Then of course there's the issue with the OS being almost the exact same thing as last year, and the year before that, and the year before that, and the year before that, and the year before that. And by far the biggest concern here is the weak cell phone signal that you get out of this device. So you basically have a cell phone that doesn't really capture good cell phone signal, which is actually the most essential fundamental part of a cell phone. Do yourself a favor, try to avoid this device if possible. In fact, if you have an iPhone 6 or 6s, it's not even worth the upgrade. You're not really missing out on anything at all. It's just new, that's all. So I hope you guys enjoyed this very honest review. And be sure to check out my Facebook, Google+, Twitter, Instagram links in the video description. Hit that like button, it does help, subscribe, and thanks for watching.